It's hard to make a definitive statement about a film that is intentionally obscure, abstract, and vague. Funnily enough, these are the very characteristics that make it great in the first place. So, without further ado, let's start with Patrick Bateman, the ultimate Sigma man. As you may know, Patrick Bateman, played by the wonderful Christian Bale, gained a huge following on the internet after the film's release in 2000. Did you notice anything about these fans? Yep, most of them tend to be male. But what really interests us is that Patrick Bateman, the main character in the movie called American Psycho, was portrayed as a great representative of a male Sigma. To be honest, we can relate to that, and hopefully you can too. Patrick is, after all, living his dream. At least that's how it seems. In the movie, Patrick is portrayed as a super rich Wall Street mogul, although we never see him or anyone else actually working for a second. He lives in an expensive New York apartment surrounded by minimalist stuff. Stoics would love that, while wearing super cool looking suits and a very expensive Rolex Datejust. Rolex, by the way, doesn't want you to know that a psychopath uses one of their products, so you didn't hear that from me. Patrick is extremely charming, has a steady circle of friends, a beautiful wife, and has an easier time seducing women than shirtless Brad Pitt. As if that wasn't enough, Patrick also talks openly and bluntly about his interests, in this case, cool 80s music. So yeah, it's not particularly hard to understand why the Sigma community, if there is even such a thing, says there's a lot to like, or at least admire about Patrick Bateman. But here comes the teensy problem. He's a serial killer. Patrick has a penchant for killing young women. Ted Bundy seems to be an inspiration for the character, though he'll put down just about anything that annoys him, including coworkers and homeless people. In his words, "I can only feel greed and disgust." If you're one of those misanthropic depressives who thinks The Last of Us 2 was a great game, don't worry. He also senselessly kills little doggies. That should be enough to cook your brain. Funnily enough, these aren't Patrick Bateman's only weaknesses. For starters, this man is incredibly vain. He takes immense pride in his appearance, which he seems to have achieved through a rigorous workout regime and thousands of potentially pointless cosmetics. And although he displays the composure of a Buddhist, Patrick often flips out over irrelevant and superficial nonsense. The best and funniest example is how his work colleagues compete for the prize of who has the most beautiful business card, even though they all look damn much alike. And finally, Patrick is also a highly hypocritical, cheating cunt. Just like a woke male feminist, he's obligated to say what he thinks most people would like to hear. This is a man who talks about feeding people in need, educating the poor, promoting women's rights, and rescuing starving children while slashing homeless people and defenseless women in his spare time. And he did it before couch activism existed. The interesting thing about him, however, is that he's a contradiction not only for himself, but for others as well. Women find him charming and extremely attractive, although they find something strange about him. Men want to imitate him, but at the same time badmouth him when he seems to win in any argument. We find this brutally fascinating. While Patrick exhibits traits that Sigma men admire, like independence, confidence, and blatantly nerdy interests, he's also a ruthless killer who loses his temper easily, like a beta male, and cares more about hand lotion than a human life or a dog's life, if you're not outraged enough yet. How does this come about? My suspicion is that this is a never good example of how easily we humans fall into the trap of superficiality. Patrick Bateman's greater strength is what makes him scary in the first place. He's brutally charming. He can easily seduce both men and women, and he's extremely hard to resist. It doesn't matter what he does or how depraved he is. He's just too damn good looking. What is psychopathy? This great movie features a subject liked by Hollywood and horror fans alike. Psychopathy. No Country for Old Men, The Silence of the Lambs, Mr. Brooks, and Leon the Professional are some of the examples that come into mind that have portrayed their own version of the psychopath. But they always differ in one way or another. In short, psychopaths aren't really the kind of people you want to hire positions like government or big business, and yet that seems to be exactly the case. In the media, they're usually portrayed as functioning adults whose unavoidable side hobby is to kill people indiscriminately. We suspect that's because it's just more interesting that way, and American Psycho is no different. Patrick Bateman is brash and confident. He lacks self-control when it comes to his passion for killing strangers, and he clearly has no empathy for others. Or at least that's what we thought. I want to show you this wonderful scene, perhaps my favorite scene in the entire film, in which Patrick randomly asks his secretary Jean out on a date. This poor woman, played perfectly by Chloe Sevigny, is obviously attracted to him. Not only that, but she seems to be the only person in the world who really cares about Patrick. For some reason, Patrick has decided that she should be his next victim. Nevertheless, he takes poor Jean back to his apartment, and then this happens. Isn't that wonderful? By the way, it doesn't happen again in the whole movie. Every other person Patrick tries to kill dies on the spot. But not Jean. She's the exception. But why? Aren't psychopaths supposed to be incapable of empathy? Aren't they bad at keeping their dark impulses in check? Shouldn't they be afraid of pretty much everything? And yet Patrick breaks every single one of those DSM rules with a pretty girl. Some people say that's because he's seen that Jean really likes him. Apparently, that's what the book seems to suggest. Others think it's because there's an unresolved conflict inside him and Jean lets him know it. And still others venture to guess that it's because Patrick loves Jean in his own twisted way. If such a scenario happened in real life, with a psychopath who considers killing random strangers his Animal Crossing, we think it would never have happened. No matter how nice or sincere Jean was, she'd be deader than disco music. That's not to say we don't find the fact that this scene exists in such a film fascinating, especially considering that the film hints at the end that Patrick did confess to his murders, but that it ultimately meant nothing. In the end, he still wants to inflict his unending pain on others. He's still a psychopath, angry at society he doesn't understand. Why did he spare Jean? Did she say the right things? Did she succeed in moving Patrick's corrupt heart? Or was she just lucky? Well, we don't know, and we love the fact we don't know. American Psycho is an excellent film full of contradictions, roller coasters of emotions, and immortal memes. But the best thing about it is that it makes you think. In this day and age, it probably won't be discussed seriously, not because of the murders, no one cares about that, but because it dares to show scenes that suggest the highly heretical premise that women are bad. This stupid culture, unfortunately, cannot tell the difference between portrayal and advocacy. But if you haven't succumbed to this tendency and haven't seen the movie in a while, please give it a go. You'll be surprised, and of course, if you know more, feel free to let us know in the comments. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to see more videos like this.